1 year after the humans first arrived at Veltara, the galaxy was transformed beyond recognition. The ancient Kethmori ruins had yielded secrets that made even the improved warp technology look primitive. Civilizations that had never met were now close neighbors. Trade, culture, and knowledge flowed freely across distances that had once seemed impossible to cross. Captain Jiho stood on the observation deck of the new starship Unity, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's first truly galactic vessel. The ship was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining human innovation with Veltarian preservation techniques, Andromedan mathematics, and technologies from a dozen other species. "It's beautiful," said Park Minji, joining him at the viewing port. She wore the insignia of Chief Engineer of the Galactic Cooperative Engineering Institute, a position that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. The Unity was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of what different species could accomplish when they worked together instead of competing against each other. "The final tests are complete," reported Kim Daeho from the bridge. His role as coordinator of galactic communications had evolved into something like an interstellar internet administrator. "All systems are operating at peak efficiency." Han. So Young materialized as a hologram from her research station near the Kethmori ruins. "The archaeological data from the ancient sites has been integrated into all ship systems. We're now using technology that's been improved continuously for over 5,000 years." Dr. Yoon Hana was examining the crew roster for their upcoming mission. "Representatives from 43 different species," she reported with satisfaction, "each bringing their own unique perspective and expertise." The Unity's mission was ambitious even by the new standards of galactic cooperation. They would travel beyond the edge of known space, seeking new civilizations and new knowledge to bring back to the rapidly expanding galactic community. Highkeeper Velnoth approached the group, moving with the purposeful stride he had developed since embracing change. "The Council of Eternal Wisdom has approved the expedition," he announced, "though I confess we no longer call ourselves by that name." "What do you call yourselves now?" Captain Jiho asked with a smile. "The Council of Endless Learning," Velnoth replied, "a much more accurate description of our current activities." The transformation of Veltarian society had been remarkable to witness. The species that had once feared change above all else had become some of the galaxy's most enthusiastic innovators. Their natural patience and attention to detail, combined with human-style experimentation, had produced advances that amazed everyone. "The new warp drives are ready for testing," Park Minji announced. Her latest creation didn't just move ships faster than light. It moved them through dimensions that bypassed normal space entirely. "We can now travel from one edge of the galaxy to the other in less than an hour." "And the communication network?" Kim Daeho asked. "Instantaneous contact with any point in known space," she confirmed. "Distance is no longer a barrier to cooperation." Han So-young's research had revealed that the Kethmori hadn't vanished. They had transcended. Their technology had eventually allowed them to exist in higher dimensions, beyond the reach of normal matter and energy. But they had left their archives behind as a gift for whoever might follow in their footsteps. "The Kethmori records show they faced the same choice we did," she reported. "They could have kept their advanced technology to themselves, ruling over lesser species. Instead, they chose to share their knowledge and help everyone advance." "What happened to them?" Dr. Yoon Hana asked. "They evolved beyond the need for physical existence," Han So-young explained. But their message was clear. True advancement comes through cooperation and sharing, not domination and control. The bridge of the Unity bustled with activity as representatives from dozens of species prepared for departure. The sight would have been impossible to imagine a year earlier. Beings who had never met working together as if they had been friends for centuries. Ambassador Thexon, who had initially been skeptical of rapid change, now served as the ship's diplomatic coordinator. "The Rigel system has requested inclusion in the next wave of technological upgrades," he reported. "They're particularly interested in the new dimensional travel methods." "Approved," Captain Jiho replied. "All advances are shared with everyone. That's how the system works." The principle of open knowledge sharing had become the foundation of the new galactic civilization. No species could advance by holding back, others because cooperation always produced better results than competition. Park Minji activated the Unity's new drive systems. Beginning dimensional transition, she announced. Destination, unknown space beyond the galactic rim. The ship didn't move in any conventional sense. Instead, reality shifted around it, carrying them through dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. In moments, they had traveled further than any ship in galactic history. New star systems detected, Kim Daeho reported from his sensor station. And artificial structures. We're not the first to reach this region. The view screen showed a cluster of worlds connected by what appeared to be solid bridges of crystallized space-time. Cities floated in the void between planets sustained by technology that made even Keth Mori achievements look primitive. We're receiving a transmission, announced the ship's Centaurian communications officer. Universal mathematics format. They're trying to establish contact. Captain Jiho straightened his uniform. Open a channel. Let's see what we can learn from each other. The transmission resolved into an image of beings unlike any they had encountered before. They appeared to be made of living light, constantly shifting between different forms and configurations. Welcome, travelers, the being said in perfect universal mathematical language. We have been observing your progress with great interest. We are the Ilthmora, and we have much to share with those who choose cooperation over conquest. Yunhana smiled as she realized what they had found. Another civilization that chose the path of sharing knowledge rather than hoarding it. The conversation that followed would reshape galactic understanding yet again. The Ilthmora had spent millions of years perfecting technologies that could alter the fundamental laws of physics. They had created portable universes, tamed black holes, and learned to travel not just through space and time but through alternate realities. And like the humans, like the reformed Veltarians, like all truly advanced civilizations, they had discovered that the greatest achievements came through cooperation and sharing. We offer you our knowledge freely, the Ilthmora ambassador explained. As we have done with 47 other civilizations who have reached this level of development. 47 others? Han So-young asked in amazement. The galaxy is vast and filled with wonders you have yet to imagine. Each civilization that chooses cooperation over domination eventually finds its way to us. Together, we form a network of knowledge and friendship that spans multiple galaxies. Captain Jiho felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The journey that had begun with humanity's simple desire to reach the stars had led to something far greater than anyone could have imagined. We accept your offer, he said, and we offer our own knowledge in return. The Unity docked with one of the Ilthmora's dimensional stations, beginning a new chapter in galactic history. The humans who had once been dismissed as a chaotic young race had become the catalyst for the greatest period of advancement and cooperation the galaxy had ever known. Park Minji was already deep in discussion with Ilthmora engineers about combining their reality-altering technology with human innovation principles. Kim Daeho was working to integrate their communication networks. Han So-young was studying their scientific methods. Dr. Yunhana was learning about their approach to social cooperation. As Captain Jiho watched his crew begin another round of collaborative discovery, he reflected on how far they had all come. The galaxy that had once been divided by suspicion and artificial barriers was now united by the simple recognition that everyone benefits when knowledge is shared freely. The Veltarians had been wrong about many things, but they had been right about one. The young races did need guidance. They just hadn't realized that sometimes the best guidance comes from learning to question everything you thought you knew. The stars that had once seemed impossibly distant were now just the beginning of an infinite journey of discovery and cooperation. And at the heart of it all was the lesson humanity had taught the galaxy. True strength comes not from what you can keep to yourself, but from what you choose to share with others. The news spread through the galaxy like ripples in a cosmic pond. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Veltarians had opened their sealed archives. Species that had waited centuries for access to warp technology suddenly found themselves invited to learn not just the old methods but revolutionary new approaches that made faster-than-light travel accessible to everyone. Captain Jiho stood in the council chambers of Veltara, addressing representatives from dozens of species. The Great Crystal Hall had been modified with human technology, making it possible for beings of vastly different physiologies to communicate effectively. The choice we faced was simple, he explained to the assembled crowd. We could keep this technology for ourselves, giving humanity an advantage over everyone else, or we could share it freely, helping all our galactic neighbors advance together. In the front row, High Keeper Velnoth listened with an expression that might have been wonder. The ancient Veltarian had spent the last month learning human concepts like innovation, experimentation, and collaborative development. It had been the most challenging and rewarding period of his long life. But why share? Asked Ambassador Thexon from the Rigel system. His species had been waiting 40 years for access to Veltarian testing protocols. Your people could have controlled galactic trade and travel for centuries. Dr. Yoon Hana answered from her position at the communication console. Because isolation makes everyone weaker. The greatest advances come from different minds working together on shared problems. Park Minji was conducting a demonstration of the latest warp drive improvements. Her engineering team now included Veltarian crystal shapers, Andromedan mathematicians, and Centaurian energy specialists. Together, they had created devices that made the original human breakthrough look primitive. Observe the efficiency ratings, she said, activating a warp drive no larger than a coffee cup. The field it generated could move a ship of substantial size across the galaxy in hours rather than years. By combining human engineering with Veltarian preservation techniques and insights from 12 other species, we've achieved energy efficiency levels that none of us could have reached alone. Han So-young had established research stations throughout the galaxy, all connected by an instantaneous communication network based on the same principles as warp travel. Scientific collaboration is happening at a pace we never imagined possible, she reported. Discoveries made on one world are being tested and improved on dozens of others within hours. Kim Daeho had become the coordinator of what was being called the Galactic Knowledge Network. His communication systems allowed real-time cooperation between species separated by thousands of light years. The old system required each species to solve the same problems in isolation, he explained to the assembly. Now we solve problems once and share the solutions with everyone. But the changes weren't without controversy. Ambassador Kresh of the Vega Collective stood up, his scaled features showing disapproval. This rapid change disturbs the natural order. Some species are not ready for such advanced technology. With respect, Captain Jiho replied, who decides readiness? For 3,000 years the Veltarians made that decision based on incomplete information. How many species were denied the stars because they didn't think the way Veltarians expected them to think? High Keeper Velnoth rose from his seat. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. Captain Jiho speaks truly. Our testing protocols were designed for species that thought like us. We denied advancement to races whose minds worked differently, not because they were unworthy, but because we couldn't understand their approach to problems. He gestured to a display showing the galaxy before and after the human breakthrough. In 6 months, we have seen more genuine innovation than in the previous 6 centuries. This is not chaos. This is growth. Park Minji had moved on to her next project, archaeological expeditions to find more Kethmori artifacts. If we can discover the complete archives of the original inventors, she explained, we might find technologies that make warp travel look simple. Dr. Yoon Hana had been analyzing the psychological effects of the rapid changes on various species. Some civilizations are struggling with the pace of advancement, she reported. Species that spent centuries perfecting one approach to problems are having difficulty adapting to rapid innovation. That's natural, Captain Jiho acknowledged. Change is always difficult, but the alternative is stagnation. Han So-young displayed her latest findings from the research network. We've already identified 17 different approaches to faster-than-light travel, each with advantages for specific applications. The Veltarian method is just one option among many. Kim Daeho had been monitoring galactic communication patterns, Trade routes are changing daily as new warp technologies make previously impossible journeys routine. Species that never had contact before are becoming neighbors. The changes weren't limited to technology. Ambassador Final of the Outer Spiral raised a concern that many shared. Our traditional ways of life are being disrupted. Ancient customs and social structures are breaking down. Some change is inevitable, Dr. Yunhana replied gently. But change doesn't have to mean loss. It can mean growth. She displayed cultural exchange data, showing how different species were learning from each other in ways that went far beyond technology. Veltarian patience and preservation techniques are being adopted by impulsive species. Human innovation methods are helping rigid societies become more flexible. Everyone is benefiting. Highkeeper Velnoth had his own concerns. My people are struggling to find their place in this new galaxy. For 3 millennia, we were the guardians of the sacred, knowledge. Now that knowledge is free for everyone to improve upon. Captain Jiho approached the ancient being with compassion. Your people haven't lost their purpose. You've found a new one. Instead of guarding knowledge, you're helping it grow. Park Minji looked up from her latest prototype. The preservation techniques your people developed are crucial to our work. Without Veltarian data storage methods, we couldn't maintain the research networks that make this collaboration possible. And your experience with testing and evaluation is invaluable, Han So-young added. Who better to help assess new technologies than people who've spent centuries studying them? The assembly was interrupted by an urgent message from Kim Daeho. I'm receiving reports from exploration ships using the new warp drives. They've found something extraordinary. The main display showed images from the edge of known space. Ancient structures floated in the void, clearly artificial, but unlike anything any known species had built. Kethmori ruins, Dr. Yunhana breathed. Intact facilities that might contain their complete technological archives. This is what we've been building toward, Park Minji said with excitement. The chance to learn from the original masters themselves. Ambassador Thexon stood again. And who will control this new knowledge? Will it be shared freely like the warp technology, or will someone claim it for their own advantage? Captain Jiho didn't hesitate. It will be shared. That's not just a promise. It's the only way this system works. The moment anyone tries to hoard knowledge or use it for domination, the collaborative networks break down. High Keeper Velnoth made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. The Veltarians volunteered to coordinate the archaeological expeditions. We know the Kethmori artifacts better than anyone, and we have experience in preserving ancient knowledge. But this time, he added with something that might have been a smile, we'll preserve it by studying it, improving it, and sharing it with everyone. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted 6 months earlier. Species that had been isolated for millennia were working together. Technologies that had remained static for centuries were advancing daily, and at the center of it all was a simple idea that humans had brought to the stars. Knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied. But the greatest discoveries were still ahead of them, waiting in the ancient ruins at the edge of known space. The real revolution was just beginning. Highkeeper Velnoth arrived at the testing facility with the full council of eternal wisdom. 12 ancient Veltarians materialized in the main chamber, their crystalline forms casting rainbow patterns across the walls. Each council member was centuries old, their bodies showing the deep blue veins that marked the most experienced of their kind. Where are the humans who dare to corrupt the sacred trials? Velnoth demanded, his voice echoing with authority that had gone unchallenged for millennia. Velkoth led them to the chamber where Park Minji was putting the finishing touches on her experimental warp drive. The small device hummed quietly on a workbench, looking nothing like the massive crystalline systems the Veltarians were used to. High Keeper, Velkoth said nervously. The humans have modified our testing equipment. Modified? Council. Member Velthara stepped forward, her ancient form crackling with indignation. No species has ever dared to change the sacred systems. Captain Jiho approached respectfully. High Keeper, honored council members, we mean no disrespect to your traditions. We simply sought to understand the principles behind your technology. And in understanding, we found ways to improve it, Park Minji added, not looking up from her work. The council members moved as one toward the modified crystal systems. Everywhere they looked, they saw equipment that had remained unchanged for centuries now operating with impossible efficiency. "This cannot be," whispered council member Velroth. "The ancient methods are perfect." Han So-young stepped forward with her scientific data. "With respect, honored ones, our analysis shows that your methods, while functional, are based on incomplete information." She activated a holographic display showing the energy consumption patterns of the original systems versus the modified ones. "Your technology works, but it uses far more power than necessary and operates much less efficiently than optimal." "Impossible," Velnoth declared. "Our knowledge comes directly from the Keth Mori artifacts." "Incomplete artifacts," Kim Dae-ho said, bringing up the historical files he had discovered. "According to your own records, you only found fragments of the original technology. The complete designs were never recovered." Dr. Yoon Hana approached the situation from a different angle. "High Keeper, may I ask you something? When did your people last make an improvement to your warp technology?" "Improvement?" Velnoth seemed confused by the question. "The technology is perfect, why would it need improvement?" "But when did you last test that assumption?" Captain Jiho asked gently. "When did you last try to innovate or experiment?" The council members exchanged uncertain looks. The question appeared to have no meaning for them. "We preserve, Council Lai," Member Velsina said slowly. "We maintain. We guard the sacred knowledge so that it remains pure and unchanged." "But what if unchanging isn't the same as perfect?" Park Minji asked. She activated her experimental warp drive, and space around it began to bend in ways that made the ancient council's technology look crude by comparison. The device was small, enough to hold in one hand, yet it generated a more stable warp field than systems that filled entire chambers. The energy requirements were so low that it ran off the same power source as her tablet. "Observe," she said simply. The warp field expanded, creating a stable bubble of altered spacetime around the device. But unlike the chaotic, energy-hungry fields generated by Veltarian technology, this field was elegant and controlled. Council member Velnoth staggered backward. That field strength should require the power output of 3 fusion reactors. "It would using your methods," Park Minji agreed, "but there are better ways to achieve the same result." Han So-young displayed her analysis of the Veltarian technology. "Your people have been thinking about this problem in terms of forcing spacetime to do what you want. But spacetime has natural properties that can be used more efficiently. It's like the difference between swimming against a river current and learning to navigate with it," Kim Dae-ho added. "Both methods will get you where you're going, but one requires much less effort." Dr. Yoon Hana could see the psychological impact their demonstration was having on the council members. Centuries of certainty were crumbling before their eyes. "High Keeper," she said compassionately. "This doesn't diminish what your people have accomplished. You preserved knowledge that might otherwise have been lost forever. That's a noble achievement. But we have denied the gift of the stars to countless species," Velnoth said, his voice hollow with realization. "We have held back the progress of the galaxy because we believed our incomplete understanding was complete truth." Captain Jiho stepped forward. "It doesn't have to stay that way. Knowledge is meant to grow and improve." Council member Velthara was examining Park Minji's warp drive with increasing amazement. "The field stability is beyond anything in our records. How did you achieve this?" "By questioning assumptions," Park Minji replied. "Your people assumed that the fragments you found represented the pinnacle of Keth Mori technology. But what if they were just the beginning? What if the Keth Mori themselves were still improving their designs when their civilization ended?" Kim Dae-ho had been analyzing more of the facility's historical databases. "I've found evidence that supports that theory," he announced. "The Keth Mori artifacts you discovered show signs of being experimental prototypes, not finished products." "Prototypes?" Velnoth asked. "Test versions," Han So-young explained. The Kethmori were still developing and refining their technology when something happened to their civilization. What you preserved were their works in progress, not their final achievements. The implications hit the council like a physical blow. For 3,000 years, they had based their entire understanding of faster-than-light travel on incomplete and unfinished designs. If this is true, Council Member Velroth said slowly, then we have been guardians of ignorance, not wisdom. No, Captain Jiho said firmly. You've been guardians of potential. Without your preservation of the Kethmori fragments, we never could have learned enough to move beyond them. Park Minji was already working on her next innovation. If I combine what we've learned about Kethmori technology with human engineering principles, she said, I think we can create something that surpasses anything that's ever existed. She began connecting additional components to her experimental drive. The Kethmori were working with the scientific knowledge of their time, 4,000 years ago. We have the advantage of everything that's been learned since then. The new device she was building was even more compact than the first, but her calculations showed it would generate warp fields of unprecedented power and stability. This is madness, whispered Council Member Velsina. You would surpass the ancients themselves? We would honor them, Captain Jiho replied, by continuing the work they started. Dr. Yoon Hana had been studying the psychological profiles of the Veltarian Council. Your people have been living in fear, she observed. Fear that change would destroy what you've preserved. But change can also fulfill its potential. Velkoth, who had witnessed the humans' progress from the beginning, found his voice. High Keeper, I have seen them work. They do not destroy, they improve. They do not disrespect the ancient knowledge. They complete it. Park Minji activated her second experimental drive. The warp field it generated was so advanced that it made her first device look primitive. Space-time bent around it like water around a stone, smooth and effortless. The power requirements? Velnoth asked weakly. Less than what your people used to light a single crystal chamber, she replied. The silence that followed was profound. 12 of the galaxy's most ancient and respected beings stood in the presence of technology that exceeded their wildest dreams, created in mere days by a species they had dismissed as children. What do you want from us? Velnoth finally asked. Captain, Jiho considered the question carefully. Nothing, he said. We want to give you something instead. Give us what? The chance to move forward, to stop being guardians of the past and become partners in the future. Park Minji looked up from her work. Your people have protected this knowledge for 3,000 years. Now let us help you make it grow. The Council of Eternal Wisdom faced a choice that would define their civilization's future. They could cling to their ancient role as unchanging guardians, or they could embrace the terrifying and wonderful possibility of becoming something new. The second day brought new challenges, but the humans approached them with growing confidence. Park Minji had spent the night studying the crystal systems, and her understanding of the technology was advancing at an incredible pace. The second trial involves dimensional fold mechanics, Velkoth announced, though his voice lacked the certainty it had held the day before. He led them to a new chamber, where massive crystalline rings floated in the air, slowly rotating around each other in complex patterns. This test typically requires decades to master, he explained. You must demonstrate the ability to manipulate space itself, creating stable passages between distant points. Park Minji examined the floating rings with her engineer's eye. These are field generators, she said to her crewmates. They're creating artificial gravity wells to bend space-time. But look at how much energy they're using, Kim Dae-ho added, studying his instruments. The power consumption is enormous for what they're actually achieving. Han So-young was scanning the rings with her scientific equipment. The field geometry is stable but crude. It's like using a sledgehammer to crack an egg. Captain Jiho watched Velkoth's reaction to their comments. The test administrator was becoming more agitated with each observation the humans made. Perhaps you should focus on understanding the test, rather than criticizing methods that have worked for millennia, he suggested. We're not criticizing, Dr. Yoon Hana said diplomatically. We're trying to understand why such an advanced civilization would choose such an inefficient approach. Inefficient? Velkoth's crystalline form flickered with indignation. These systems have been perfected over thousands of years. Park Minji was already working on her tablet, running calculations. But what if they weren't perfected? What if they were just maintained? She connected her device to one of the crystal interfaces and began inputting new parameters. If I adjust the field harmonics to match the natural resonance frequency of local spacetime, the floating rings suddenly began moving in different patterns. Instead of the slow, ponderous rotation they had maintained for centuries, they now spun with smooth efficiency. The energy readings dropped by 60%, while the field strength actually increased. "Stop!" Velkoth cried out. "You're disrupting systems that have operated unchanged since before your species learned to use fire." "That's exactly the problem," Park Minji replied, continuing her adjustments. "They haven't changed. Technology should evolve and improve." Kim Daeho had been exploring the facility's communication networks more deeply. "I found something interesting," he announced. "The original specifications for this equipment, the Kethmori civilization, the ones who really invented this technology, they had much more efficient designs." He projected a hologram showing ancient technical diagrams. "Look at this. The original field generators used a completely different approach. They were smaller, more powerful, and used a fraction of the energy." "That's impossible," Velkoth insisted. "Our methods are based on careful study of the ancient artifacts." "But incomplete study," Dr. Yoon Hana said gently. She had been analyzing the historical records. "According to these files, the Veltarians only found fragments of the original technology. You've been working with pieces of a puzzle, not the complete picture." Han So-young had made her own discovery. "I've been analyzing the crystal matrices you use for data storage. They're incredibly sophisticated, but they're all read-only. You can access information, but you can't modify it." "Of course," Velkoth said, as if this were obvious. "The sacred knowledge must be preserved unchanged." "But how do you test new ideas?" Captain Jiho asked. "How do you verify that your methods are actually the best ones?" The test administrator looked confused by the question. "Why would we need to test them? They are the methods of the ancients." The humans exchanged glances. They were beginning to understand the real problem. The Veltarians hadn't just preserved ancient technology. They had turned it into a religion. Park Minji had finished her. Modifications to the dimensional fold system. The crystalline rings now moved in perfect harmony, creating space-time distortions with minimal energy expenditure. "This is actually easy once you understand the underlying principles," she said. "Easy?" Velkoth's voice rose to a pitch that made the crystals around them resonate. "Species have spent lifetimes trying to master dimensional fold mechanics. Because they were trying to memorize procedures instead of understanding concepts," Kim Daeho explained. "Once you grasp how space-time actually works, the math becomes straightforward." Dr. Yoon Hana was studying the test administrator's reactions with professional interest. "You're frightened," she observed. "Not angry. Frightened. Why?" Velkoth's crystalline form dimmed. If what you say is true, then our entire way of life would need to change," Captain Jiho finished gently. "And change is always scary." Han So-young had moved on to analyzing the third trial's equipment. "Captain," she called out, "you need to see this. The next test involves creating a stable warp bubble, but the design they're using is fundamentally flawed." She showed them a crystalline chamber filled with energy field generators. "They're trying to create a warp field using brute force. It's like trying to fly by flapping your arms really, really hard." Park Minji joined her examination of the warp bubble chamber. "The field geometry is all wrong," she agreed, "and the power requirements must be massive." "They are," Kim Daeho confirmed, reading the energy specifications. "This system draws more power than our entire ship." "But it doesn't have to," Park Minji said, her excitement growing. "If you approach the problem differently..." She began sketching modifications on her tablet. Instead of trying to force space-time into the desired shape, her approach worked with the natural properties of the universe. Her calculations showed a warp field that was not only more stable but required only a tiny fraction of the energy. "This is heresy," Velkoth whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," Captain Jiho said firmly. "This is progress." Park Minji had connected her tablet to the warp bubble chamber's control systems. "Let me show you what I mean," she said, beginning to implement her modifications. The chamber's energy field generators began to shift their positions, following her new calculations. The chaotic energy patterns that had existed for centuries suddenly smoothed into elegant flowing streams. "The power draw is dropping," Han So-young reported, watching her instruments in amazement. 80% reduction and still falling. "Field stability is increasing," added Kim Dae-ho. "The warp bubble is actually more stable than before." Dr. Yoon Hana was monitoring Velkoth's biometric readings through her medical scanner. "His stress levels are off the charts," she said quietly to Captain Jiho. "This is devastating his entire worldview." The captain approached the distraught test administrator. "Change doesn't have to be destructive," he said kindly. "It can be liberating." "But if our methods are wrong," Velkoth said in a broken voice, "then we have been failing every species that came to us. We have denied them the stars because we didn't understand the very technology we claim to guard." "You preserved the knowledge," Captain Jiho pointed out. "Without the Veltarians, these secrets might have been lost forever." "That's not failure. That's success." Park Minji had finished her modifications to the warp bubble chamber. The system was now operating with unprecedented efficiency and stability. "I think I understand how to build a better warp drive now," she announced. "Better than ours?" Velkoth asked weakly. "Better than anything that's ever existed," she replied. "The Kethamori were brilliant, but they were working with the technology of their time. We have 4,000 years of additional scientific advancement to build upon." Kim Dae-ho's communication equipment was picking up urgent transmissions from the main planet. "High Keeper Velnoth is on his way," he reported, "along with the entire Council of Eternal Wisdom." "They're coming to stop us," Dr. Yoon Hana guessed. "Or to see for themselves," Captain Jiho replied. "Either way, we need to be ready to explain what we've discovered." Han So-young was running final scans on all the modified systems. "Everything is working better than ever," she reported. "Energy efficiency up, stability up, power requirements down across the board." Park Minji was already working on her next idea. "If I can combine the principles we've learned here with human engineering techniques," she said, "I think we can build something truly revolutionary." As night fell over the testing facility, the humans had not only passed 3 trials that should have taken decades each, they had fundamentally improved every system they touched. But their greatest challenge was yet to come, convincing the guardians of ancient knowledge that change was not their enemy. The moon of Veltara was a world of impossible geometry. Crystalline structures twisted through dimensions that hurt human eyes to follow. Energy fields danced between floating platforms, creating patterns that seemed to mock the laws of physics. This was where species came to prove they deserved the stars. Test Administrator Velkoth met them at the landing pad. He was older than the others, his crystal body showing veins of deep blue that spoke of centuries of experience. "Welcome to the testing grounds," he announced, with the patience of someone who had given this speech countless times. "Here you will face challenges that have tested the greatest minds in the galaxy." Captain Jiho looked around at the strange structures. Everything seemed designed to be confusing and overwhelming. "What exactly are we expected to do?" "You will solve the riddles of space and time," Velkoth explained, leading them toward the largest crystalline building. "You will prove you understand the fundamental forces that govern faster than light travel. Most species take decades just to comprehend the first test." Inside the building, walls of living crystal displayed equations that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Strange symbols floated in the air, rearranging themselves in patterns that followed no logic the humans could recognize. "The first trial is understanding the fundamental harmonics of spacetime," Velkoth said, gesturing to a complex arrangement of crystal interfaces. "You must demonstrate that you can perceive the mathematical relationships that allow matter, to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Park Minji approached the crystals carefully. As an engineer, she was used to complex mathematics, but these symbols were completely alien. She touched one of the crystal surfaces and felt a strange vibration run through her hand. "These patterns," she said slowly, studying the shifting equations. "They remind me of something." "What?" asked Han So-young, pulling out her scientific instruments to scan the crystal displays. "Quantum field theory," Park Minji replied, her excitement growing. "Back at Seoul National University, I studied theoretical physics before switching to engineering. These symbols look different, but the mathematical relationships, they're similar to equations I've seen before." Kim Dae-ho was examining the room's communication systems, trying to understand how information was stored and transmitted. "There are data streams everywhere," he reported. "The crystals are constantly exchanging information, but the patterns are strange. It's like they're following very rigid rules." Dr. Yoon Hana was studying Velkoth himself, watching how the alien interacted with the technology. "He's not actually thinking about the problems," she whispered to Captain Ji-ho. "He's just following memorized procedures." Captain Ji-ho nodded. He had noticed the same thing. The Veltarians moved through their ancient facility like people performing a ritual rather than solving problems. Park Minji had pulled out her tablet and was sketching rapidly. "If I modify the human faster-than-light theories we were working on," she muttered to herself, "and apply them to these crystal patterns." "What are you doing?" Velkoth asked, noticing her activity. "I'm trying to understand the relationship between your mathematical model and the physics theories we use on Earth," she explained. "The approaches are different, but the underlying principles seem similar." The test administrator looked confused. "You cannot simply compare our sacred knowledge to your primitive theories. These equations have been perfected over millennia." "But that's just it," Park Minji said, showing him her tablet. "I don't think they are perfected. Look at this section here. The energy efficiency calculations are incomplete. You're using a lot more power than necessary." Velkoth stared at her tablet with something approaching horror. "That is impossible. Our methods have been tested by hundreds of species over thousands of years." Meanwhile, Kim Dae-ho had connected his equipment to the facility's data streams and was analyzing the information flow. "Captain," he called out, "I'm finding something interesting. The mathematical proofs they're using, they're based on assumptions that were never verified." "What do you mean?" Captain Ji-ho asked. "It's like someone built a house on a foundation. They never checked," Kim Dae-ho explained. "The math works, but only if you accept certain starting conditions. No one ever questioned whether those conditions were actually correct." Han So-young was running her own analysis on the crystal technology. "The energy patterns are fascinating," she said, "but they're also inefficient. These crystals are working much harder than they need to." Dr. Yoon Hana had been studying the historical records built into the crystal systems. "I found something disturbing," she announced. "According to these files, the Veltarians didn't invent warp technology. They found it." "Found it?" Captain Ji-ho asked. "The records show they discovered ancient artifacts from a vanished civilization. They reverse-engineered the technology but never fully understood how it worked." Velkoth's crystalline form began to flicker with distress. "That information is classified. How did you access those files?" "They weren't protected very well," Kim Dae-ho admitted. "Your security systems assumed that no one would know how to look for them." Park Minji was now completely absorbed in her calculations. She had connected her tablet to several crystal interfaces and was running simulations. "If I adjust the harmonic frequencies here," she said to herself, "and modify the field geometry there." Suddenly, one of the crystal displays began showing completely new patterns. Energy readings spiked across the room as Park Minji's modifications took effect. "Stop!" Velkoth cried out in panic. "You don't know what you're doing. Those systems have operated unchanged for centuries." "That's the problem," Park Minji replied calmly. "They've been unchanged. No one has tried to improve them or fix their obvious flaws." The crystal she was working with began to glow brighter than any of the others. The energy patterns became More stable and efficient. Other crystals in the room started resonating in harmony. "This is impossible," Velkoth whispered. "The first test usually takes species 30 to 50 years to complete. You've been here for 6 hours." Captain Jiho looked around at his crew, all of whom were making rapid progress on problems that had stumped alien civilizations for decades. "Maybe the problem isn't that the tests are too hard," he suggested. "Maybe the problem is that they're based on wrong assumptions." Han So-young had been analyzing the crystal structure itself. "These aren't just display devices," she announced. "They're actually components of a warp drive system. The testing facility is built around a working faster-than-light engine." "Of course it is," Velkoth said, as if explaining something obvious to children. "How else would we test your understanding of the technology?" "But you're using it wrong," Park Minji said, looking up from her calculations. "The energy field is configured for stability, not efficiency. You could get the same results with a fraction of the power." Dr. Yoon Hana was reviewing the historical files she had found. The original civilization that built this technology was called the Keth Mori. They vanished over 4,000 years ago, before the Veltarians even achieved spaceflight. Kim Daeho had been listening to the facility's communication networks. "I'm picking up transmissions from the main planet," he reported. "They're talking about us. The Veltarian leadership is getting worried about our progress." "Worried, Captain?" Jiho asked. "They expected us to spend months just understanding the basic concepts. Instead, we're already modifying their technology." Park Minji stepped back from the crystal interface she had been working with. The energy patterns around it were now flowing, in smooth, efficient streams instead of the chaotic turbulence from before. "I think I understand how this works now," she said, "and I think I know how to make it work better." Velkoth stared at the improved crystal system with growing alarm. In 6 hours, these humans had accomplished what his people considered impossible. They hadn't just solved the first test, they had improved upon technology that had remained unchanged for millennia. "This cannot be," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The sacred knowledge is perfect. It cannot be improved." "With respect," Captain Jiho said gently, "nothing is perfect. There's always room for improvement if you're willing to question your assumptions." The test administrator activated his communication device with trembling hands. "High Keeper Velnoth," he transmitted, "we have a situation. These humans, they're not following the proper procedures." The response came back immediately. "What do you mean?" "They're changing things, High Keeper. They're modifying the sacred technology itself. And their changes appear to be improvements." There was a long silence before Velnoth replied, "That is impossible. Maintain observation. Report any further developments immediately." As the first day of testing came to an end, the humans had not only passed the first trial, but had fundamentally altered the testing facility itself. The crystals around them hummed with new energy, more efficient and powerful than ever before. But none of them realized they had just taken the first step toward shattering a 3,000-year-old civilization's understanding of the universe. The crystal towers of Veltara stretched into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Each tower hummed with ancient energy, casting rainbow patterns across the white stone streets below. For 3,000 years, these towers had watched over the galaxy's greatest secret. High Keeper Velnoth stood in the central tower's highest chamber. His crystalline body caught the light from 3 suns, creating dancing colors on the walls. Like all Veltarians, he was tall and thin, with skin that looked like clear glass filled with flowing streams of light. His people had guarded the secrets of faster-than-light travel since before most species had learned to make fire. "The humans approach," announced Keeper Velsum, her voice ringing like distant bells. She gestured to the viewing screen that showed a small metal ship moving through space. "Their vessel is crude but functional." Velnoth studied the approaching ship with ancient eyes. "Another young race seeking the forbidden knowledge. How long did it take them to reach the stars?" "Less than 100 years since their first flight," Velsum replied. "They are unusually quick, but still children playing with forces they cannot understand." The High Keeper nodded slowly. The Veltarians had seen many species come seeking warp technology. Some were patient and wise, willing to spend decades proving their worth. Others were impatient and dangerous, wanting power without understanding its cost. All had to pass the trials. The trials had been designed over countless centuries to test not just knowledge, but wisdom. Only species that could demonstrate true understanding of cosmic harmony were granted access to faster-than-light travel. It was the way things had always been, and the way things would always be. On board the human ship Serendipity, Captain Lee Jiho watched the crystal towers grow larger on his screen. He was a man in his 40s with kind eyes and steady hands. Behind him stood his crew of 4, the best that Earth could offer. "Those structures are beautiful," said Han So-young, the ship's science officer. She was young but brilliant, with short black hair and bright, curious eyes. "The energy readings are unlike anything in our databases." Park Min-ji, the chief engineer, was studying her instruments with intense focus. She was small but strong, with calloused hands that spoke of years working with machines. "The power source must be incredibly advanced. I'm reading energy patterns. That shouldn't be possible with our current understanding of physics." Kim Dae-ho, the communications officer, was a tall man with a gentle smile. He had spent years learning alien languages and customs. "I'm receiving their communication protocols. Now, they speak very formally, like they consider themselves our superiors." The 4th crew member, Dr. Yoon Hana, was the ship's medical officer and xenobiology expert. She watched the alien city with professional interest. "Their body language suggests extreme age and confidence. These beings believe they have every right to judge us." Captain Jiho nodded. "Remember, we're here as representatives of all humanity. Earth needs this technology if we're going to join the galactic community. We must be respectful but not weak." The Serendipity was guided to a landing platform made of the same white stone as the city streets. As the humans stepped out of their ship, they felt the weight of countless years of history. The air itself seemed ancient. Velnoth approached, with several other Veltarians. Their movements were slow and graceful, like beings who had never known hurry. "Welcome, humans of Earth," he said in perfect English, though his voice had a strange singing quality. "I am High Keeper Velnoth, guardian of the ancient ways." Captain Jiho bowed respectfully. "Thank you for receiving us, High Keeper. I am Captain Lee Jiho. We come seeking knowledge that might benefit both our peoples." "Knowledge," Velnoth repeated, and the word seemed to echo with hidden meaning. "Yes, you seek what many have sought before you. The power to cross the great distances between stars in moments instead of years. But such power is not given lightly." The High Keeper gestured toward the crystal towers. "For 3 millennia we have guarded the secrets of warp technology. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have watched young species destroy themselves with power they could not control. This is why the trials exist." Han So-young stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. "Trials? Tests of wisdom, understanding, and patience," explained Keeper Velsum. "No species has ever mastered faster-than-light travel without first proving they deserve such responsibility. The average time to complete the trials is 50 of your years." Park Min-ji exchanged glances with Kim Dae-ho. 50 years was longer than any of them would live. "What exactly do these trials involve?" she asked. Velnoth's crystalline features shifted into what might have been a smile. "You will learn. But first, you must understand something important. We are not teachers, offering lessons. We are guardians protecting the galaxy from chaos. If you prove unworthy, you will leave empty-handed, and your species will remain forever bound to your single star." Dr. Yoon Hana noticed something interesting in the way the Veltarians moved and spoke. They seemed to view themselves as parents, dealing with unruly children. There was no doubt in their minds that they knew best. "We understand the responsibility," Captain Jiho said carefully. "Humanity may be young compared to your people, but we have learned much about both the benefits and dangers of powerful technology." "Have you?" Velnoth asked. "In less than a century, you went from flying in primitive aircraft to crossing the void between stars. Such rapid advancement often leads to recklessness. The High Keeper began walking toward one of the smaller towers. Your trials will take place on our moon. There you will find the testing facilities that have challenged hundreds of species over the millennia. Some have succeeded eventually, most have not. As they walked, Kim Dae-ho used his communication equipment to record everything he saw. The Veltarian city was incredible, but he noticed something strange. Despite all the advanced technology around them, nothing seemed new. Every building, every device, every decorative pattern looked like it had been the same for centuries. Park. Minji was having similar thoughts about the technology she could see. The energy systems were clearly advanced, but they also seemed static. There were no signs of ongoing development or improvement. It was as if the Veltarians had reached a certain level of advancement and then stopped. High Keeper, Han So-young said politely. Your civilization is clearly ancient and wise. Are you still developing new technologies or have you achieved everything you need? Velnoth paused in his walking. The question seemed to surprise him. New technologies? Child, when one has achieved perfection, what need is there for change? We have maintained cosmic stability for 3,000 years precisely because we do not chase after every new idea. Dr. Yoon Hana found this answer fascinating from a xenobiology perspective. A species that had stopped innovating was unusual, in the extreme. Every form of life she knew of continued to adapt and change, but the Veltarians seemed to have frozen themselves in time. They reached a transport platform that would take them to the moon. As they prepared to leave, Captain Jiho looked back at the Crystal City one more time. Something about it bothered him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what. Captain, Park Minji said quietly, have you noticed that everything here looks old, not just ancient, but unchanged? I've noticed, he replied. Whatever these trials involve, I suspect they're going to test more than just our knowledge. The transport lifted off, carrying the humans toward their destiny. Behind them, the Veltarian city continued its eternal watch over the galaxy's secrets. But for the first time in centuries, those secrets were about to be challenged in ways the Guardians never expected. High Keeper Velnoth watched the transport disappear into the purple sky. He felt confident that these humans, like all the others, would spend decades struggling with concepts beyond their understanding. The trials had never failed to humble the young races. They would not fail now. He had no way of knowing that he was about to witness something that would shake his ancient civilization to its very core.